I've been lucky to work with Sean Baker and Nate Parker and some incredibly talented people. David E. Kelly. I got to work on his show. I got to work on James Duff's show. The Closer. I got to work on with some incredible people. I got to be in. Kira Sedgwick was incredible to work with. I worked on one of the earlier shows of It's Sunny in Philadelphia with those wonderful comedians. I got to work on My Wife and Kids with the brilliant Damon Wayans and Tisha Campbell. So funny. These are people who had hours of television, who I got to learn from.
This is Rob Ruckus.
Hey, this is Kate Clover.
Hey guys, it's Nick Collins here from The Effect and Better Strangers.
Hi, my name is Madeline Rose.
Hey, it's Ben McKelvey.
It's Tim Howard here from Mike and the Mechanics.
Hello, I'm Amanda Lehman.
I'm Billy Harvey.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Casey Sampson from the band Twist Stop.
Hey, it's Tony from Fastball.
Hello, everybody. My name is Isaiah Mitchell.
Hey, guys, it's Matt here from the White Lakes.
You're listening to Almost Famous Magazine.
Come join us for this interview. Check it out, Almost Famous Magazine.
Welcome, everybody, back to The Hang right here on Almost Famous Magazine. Now, we're going to get a little off the beaten path today because up until now, we've talked to a lot of musicians. But the truth is, it's not only musicians who are creative, and we want to really represent a lot of different creativity out there. So coming up in the near future, we're going to have people who are behind the scenes in the music and entertainment business. But today, I'm so excited to bring to you Jason Stuart, actor, producer, stand-up comedian, author, and all-around mensch. This guy is incredible. Now, he's going to have to live up to that intro, but for those of you who don't, for those of you who don't know him, though, just a little lead-up and a little history. He's been in I believe he's had over 150 or more acting roles, spanning everything from comedy all the way over the spectrum to drama. In one of his most serious roles that you may recognize him from as a slave owner in the acclaimed film Birth of a Nation. Along his career, he's been a staunch advocate for the LGBTQ community and as well a mentor, which is something that's near and dear to my heart because I believe that we get through life building relationships that help us through mentorship and support. So it gives us a lot to talk about this evening. So Jason, thank you so much for joining me.
I so appreciate you asking me to come.
Well, this is going to be exciting. So that people can start to kind of get to know you a little bit and understand your background. Let's dive into your story about how you decided that you wanted to become a creative, that you felt the urge and desire to be on a stage or be a performer. Where did that come from and germinate from when you were young and start to build a career for you?
Oh, it was too long ago. I can't remember. I don't remember ever not wanting to be. So it was not something that came to me. It's just something that I always wanted to do. It was always a part of who I was. I was always being funny. I was always trying to get attention. I was always trying to get someone to see that I was around, that I was a living, breathing person, because my family was so different than who I was. And I think it was just about trying to get into the room, trying to get accepted. So I've always wanted to do that. I started loving television when I was a kid. I loved, watching the Waltons and the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family and Family and all these shows that were so big in the 70s. And they felt like my family, so I felt a kinship to them, especially I Love Lucy, the Lucy Show, Here's Lucy, all those. I felt a kinship because I think that Lucy and Ricky seemed to love each other so much that it was those kind of shows really appealed to me because I didn't have that growing up. So I think I fantasized about being those people.
Yeah. What, while you were trying to gain attention, did you start to find any type of?
Oh, sure. I did plays for school. I did plays for Parks and Rec. I did plays for the West Side Jewish Center. I did plays in the parks. I did plays in community theater. I did like 5 or 10 different plays over the years. And then when I was 14, I started studying with Lawrence Park, who had played the mailman on The Real McCoys. And I was the only kid in the acting class. I stayed there from the 14 till 16, and I was the only kid in the acting class. And I remember asking him one day, "Why did you take me?" He says, "Because you wanted it so bad." And the only other kid that was in the cast was Richard Steele, who had a recurring role on Julia starring Diane Carroll. He was the kid that lived downstairs, and he was the only one, and he was a little younger than me, I think. I think he was 12, and he was the only kid in the class other than me. But I never really connected with him. And I got all these friends, and I started studying. When I was 16, I started pursuing my career, and I did my first play. I produced a play with a bunch of my friends from acting class called The Sandcastle and Ludlow Fair. It was 2 one-acts written by Lanford Wilson at the Cass Theater. And then I started auditioning for plays, and I got my first job on television on a sitcom called One Day at a Time. I did a silent bit where I chased John Punch, who was Gene Stapleton's son from All in the Family, to a door, and I was so nervous I slammed it so hard that the molding fell off. And I was supposed to chase into the door and then slam it. I was like a bad kid. And then my first actual speaking role was in a nighttime comedy soap opera called Life and Times of Eddie Roberts, and I played a sort of Sean Penn, Fast Times at Ridgemont High kind of character that was high all the time. And I played that, and I did 4 scenes. It was a guest star, and I was so nervous. I remember when I walked in there, my throat was so dry, and I was scared half to death. And I thought, this is it. I'm a star. I'm going to be working in television. And then I couldn't get a job after that. And I only gotten that job because the producer of the show was Ann Ellis, and her brother was Raymond Goldstein, and I think he's passed away, and he was a writer. And I met him because I didn't have a car, and I was going to either Thanksgiving or Passover dinner with my brother. He picked me up, and I said, "Can we stop off on Sunset Boulevard? I want to drop my picture and resume off." And he went into the Hamburger Hamlet because he couldn't wait in the car. And he got a Diet Coke, and he met this guy, and he got his card, and I met him for a minute when I came down to the coffee shop section of the place, and I called him. So my whole career has always been built on making that extra call, showing up in that extra way. Things didn't really ever come easy to me. It was not like somebody was going, "Darling, come, you're wonderful." It was go, we don't want you here. And then I realized I went to the open call that they had at Zoetrope for Rumblefish and The Outsiders. And I thought, this is me. I read that book when I was in school, and I should be in The Outsiders. And Miss Crumple, the teacher assistant, wrote a special thing in the book for me and how special I was. And I remember Jane Jenkins, the casting director, came over to me, and we were all in line waiting. And she looked at me and she went, "Yeah, that's not going to work." And I remember that was the first time I thought, oh my God, she can tell I'm gay. And that was it. And I remember that was the beginning of me feeling inferior and feeling like people didn't want me because of who I was. And I knew that I had to shut up about it. And it was pretty, it happened quite a bit over the years. And then I had a couple of casting directors like Jackie Birch and a couple others who were very sweet to me. And I got in Kindergarten Cop and Vegas Vacation and Lost and Found with David Spade and oh God, Bad Brothers or Bad Boys with Dennis O'Leary and Dennis Leary and a couple other films. In Fright Night, which I got cut out of, but she cast me in that, and a couple other things over the years. And then as the years went on, I kept showing up. And then I had a manager named Catherine James that said, "You're funny, you should do stand-up." I said, "I'm an actor. I'm not supposed to do stand-up," And I didn't know how to do it because it really wasn't as big thing as it is now. And I certainly didn't want to be myself, because if I was myself, then people would know I was gay and they wouldn't hire me, because you were sort of browbeaten in the business. Straight people at that time were very, very aggressive about who they were, and they wanted you to be like them. That was the way to be. So I remember that I went to the Comedy Store. It was 1981 at the end, and I went up and I went into a class that Robert Aguayo and Danny, Danny, I forgot Danny's last name. It'll come to me. And he's a wonderful actor. And they tore me to shreds. So I spent the next year and a half trying to get my self-esteem back. And I went up again at the Comedy Store, and I was made a non-paid showcasing regular, which is the bottom of what you could do so you could work there on occasion. And I did that for years, and then I worked at the Laugh Factory quite a bit and all these places. And then as the years went on, I started getting better as a comedian. I got on Star Search, and I won an episode, and then I got on the Merv Griffin Show, and the years went on, and then I became a very, very well-known featured act through the Funny Bones and other clubs. The Funny Bones was the biggest circuit of comedy. There was the Comedy Zones and the Improvs a little then. They had a little bit of them and a lot of other clubs, independent. And I did those, and then I couldn't move up. And I had done all these movies, but I still couldn't move up. And I thought, well, I can't talk about myself. And then Bud Freeman called me, who owns the Improv where I worked, and he said, they're doing an AIDS benefit in Chicago. I want you to headline it. And I had started to headline in smaller places. And I said, okay. And I had done a gay cruise before that, and I just didn't do well. They hired me for 4 shows, and they fired me and only had me do 2 because I thought being gay was enough, but I didn't have an act where I talked about being gay. I didn't even know, so I didn't get that. So I rewrote my entire show, did it, the Improv. It was so freeing to be myself. And after that, I decided to come out. And I sent press releases to all the daytime talk shows. And Geraldo and Sally Jesse called. And Geraldo was very big then in those days. It was the top rated show. And I did a show called Unconventional Comedians. And I came out on that show. And my whole life changed. And then from then I started headlining clubs all over the country. I got a recurring role on My Wife and Kids with Damon Wayans. I did all the sitcoms, Drew Carey, Norm Macdonald, Will and Grace, Charmed. I started doing hours shows, the drama shows. I did Strong Medicine. And then I produced my own stand-up special, sold it to the Gay Network Here TV, which was the first one. They sold it to Netflix. I think I was the first gay male comic to have a special on Netflix when they sent it to you in the mail. I did all these celebrity panel things. I was on Match Game, and I did all the VH1 things. And then I started doing hour shows more, and I did The Closer and House and all these things. And I was always the quirky guy, or I played the manager of something that had no power. And then all of a sudden social media came to play, and my fans didn't know how to find me, and I didn't know how to find them. So I started to focus on my acting work. And I got all these great parts and things. When I did The Closer, I played a straight guy, and that sort of propelled me to play sort of annoying Jewishy talk like this kind of guys. And I did a lot of those, and that got me into some films by some big directors like Ira Sachs. I got in Love is Strange with Fred Molina and John Lithgow, Marissa Tomei, and I did Sean Baker's film Tangerine. And then Birth of a Nation happened, and my whole career changed. And I played a plantation owner in 1831. And then, I just kept working hard. I kept just showing up, doing what my dad said. He always used to say, he said, when you go to the interview, wear a tie, let them know you mean business. And he meant that to be your best self. And after Birth of a Nation for 5 years, I worked straight. I did a series thing with Keanu Reeves. I did Love for Judd Apatow. I did The Immortal, where I played a really cool guy that dealt a detective that dealt in spyware. I did another called Abducted, and I played a detective in that. And I got to be on Goliath with J.K. Simmons, and I just kept showing up and doing the best that I can. And I didn't always succeed. but I never got what I called straight boy money. And I never got the opportunities to compete in the same way straight people do. And people would just basically say, keep in your own lane. And as the years have gone on, I started creating my own things. I created my own series called Smothered. We did 2 seasons. I co-created with Mitch Hara. We wrote it, produced it, and starred in it. We had 2 different directors for first season, second season. I won the Best Actor award. And also I won a couple other awards for some independent films I did, like Hank and like Father. I was nominated, and I think it was the other way around. I think I won for the other one. And then, and then COVID hit. Now we're just trying to pick up our lives. So that's the story.
Well, you mentioned a few things that I want to go back to, and I think
I was surprised
there's.
You didn't cut me off.
I know you well enough. I never cut you off. Okay. Let's go back to when you started acting school.
I was 14.
And you stuck it for the 2 years, and what he said to you, that you wanted it. He knew you wanted it.
Right. But he was also a gay man or bisexual. And he used to say that we would do a lot of improvisation in his class. And he used to say, barstool, barstool. And I was 14, 15, 16. I didn't know what he was talking about. But he said, because I was funny, and he said, you seem like a gay guy sitting at a bar making jokes. And I didn't know what he meant because I'd never been to a gay bar, and I had no reference of gay people. And that was the beginning of people starting to make me feel bad about who I was, and sort of crushed my creativity and put me in this box. Mm-hmm. So if you could see what it would be like to grow up under a welcome mat in front of a front door, like a weed growing all around it, that's what it was like. That I grew up under a mat trying to get into the house with everybody else. So everything was done, I always say I didn't go through the back door. I went through the slider or the doggy door. I just kept doing it.
Well, I mean, I think though that the idea that he was able to see within you and understand that you wanted it, that he could tell that what you had inside of you was the fire and energy to not let anybody else stand in your way of getting what you want. And that's kind of the story of your career. I mean, you've had people who have tried to stand in your way, but you find a way to overcome that. And I think I
always think I was always in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was never, I missed the closeted gay guy stuff from the 60s and 70s. In the 80s is when it sort of stopped, where gay people could play funny roles. And then I realized that I didn't want to be Charles Nelson Riley. I didn't want to be Rip Taylor. I didn't want to be Paul Lynde. I wanted to be a character actor like Dustin Hoffman or Philip Seymour Hoffman or, the people that I loved, those people that I loved. And it didn't work out in those days because I wasn't allowed. So I just kept showing up, and I went back to class. When social media came in, I started working on different characters and and I tried to change my voice, lower my voice, which took me around 10 years to do. And also from working in comedy clubs, it ruins your voice. And I tried really hard to, no matter what I did, to be good in it. I did a movie with Faye Dunaway, who's gotten a big documentary out her now, and people would say how difficult she was. And in the film with me, I saw someone who loved the work and was going to do a good job no matter what. And it was a low budget film starring Tony Goldwyn and Sean Young, Faye Dunaway, and then a bunch of other people like me in smaller roles. And when she came in character, I played a talk show host who sort of gotchas her, about her son who had killed her husband, and wrote a screenplay about it. And she had to go on a talk show and talk about it. And she played this sort of woman that was this Irish brogue, and she had this bun and this little suit, and she was total in character. And I said, Faye, is there anything I can do? And she said, let's just run the lines. And we ran the lines, and she saw that I was totally prepared, and she completely changed and took me under her arm, put her wing around me, and we just flew. It was one of the greatest experiences I ever had as an actor, working with such pros, and they put a light in front of her. She says, "No, move that light. It makes me look too good. I don't want to look too good in this. I'm a regular person." And then I remember there was somebody walking around trying to fix something when she was doing the scene, and she said her famous thing, "You're in my eye line," and people thought, "Oh, that's weird." But when someone's in your eye line, if you can imagine working in an office with somebody going like this to you and pulling your attention when you're trying to work, that's what it feels like. Because acting is incredibly intimate. And if people are moving around while you're shooting, it can cause you to, take you out. So it realized that I had the permission to say, "Hey, can we keep this quiet? Hey, I need to be quiet today and sit here." I played a really quiet guy in a film called Hank that I had the lead in. I played Hank. And there was this assistant that was so nice, but she kept coming over to me and talking to me. And the guy that played my husband in it, she said, "Look, he needs to be quiet," because all day long she kept saying, I said, "No, really, I'm fine." And I needed to be quiet to play this part. It just was, because it was a very quiet character and not something that I am. And so you have to learn to ask her what you want, very much so. And it doesn't mean that you're being rude or mean. It just means you're trying to do your work, and sometimes you just can't do it, And stand up, most of the time I can just turn around and walk on stage. But with acting, it takes more because I don't do it as much. You don't get to act as much. You go in and you do 2 or 3 days, but stand up is like my day job. I do probably 3 or 4 shows a month.
Well, I think it also speaks to what you mentioned about your father, right? Show up, be prepared. Would Faye have treated you that way had you not been prepared?
I don't think so, and I don't think so. And I remember being on Murder, She Wrote, and Angela Lansbury. I think I had 3 scenes. It's so long ago. And I remember there's one scene where I didn't have any dialogue, where I'm sitting in the police office and I'm holding this piece of ice on my head. And she saw that I held it the whole time. And she said, I said, "I know, but it's easier for me to just do this. And this way I'm in the middle of it because the camera was doing a pan past me." And then at the end of it, she said, "Let's get Jason another line in this scene. He's so good." And I thought, because people noticed me, I had lunch recently with Wally Nacita, and she was probably one of the biggest casting directors in the 80s and 90s. 70s, 80s, and 90s. She did The Big Chill and Silverado and all these great movies. And I live in Palm Springs now, and we had lunch the other day. We had lunch a couple times. And she cast me in my first feature film called Cross My Heart with Martin Short and Annette O'Toole. And Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote all the Star Wars movies, and also wrote The Big Chill, and also directed it, and also wrote Silverado, and so many other wonderful films, and The Accidental Tourist, and he was the writer producer on that. And Army Bernstein, who was a big producer, was his directorial debut. He never did it again. And I played this waiter, and I said to her, "Why did you cast me?" She said, "It's because you popped." And I said, and I thought, "Oh, okay." Because I'm never a guy that can go in and go, "Doctor, here's your chart." I would go, "Doctor, here's your chart. Doctor, here's your chart." I can't, I'm not wallpaper. And I think that's part of my gift. And it's also part of the reason I don't blend. I'm not able to do that. I'm not, what they think is in every guy.
Well, I can certainly commiserate that feeling. I've always tried to be someone who, I don't want to be third trombone. I want to be the drum major, right?
I don't mind. That's for me. I don't mind being in the ensemble.
But finding a way to stand out.
I like to be. I don't want to be the star of anything, because I don't think I'm the star type. I'm a character actor. I think I'm. I like doing my 3 or 4 scenes and playing the accountant that gets shots in his head, or something. But I'm not the usual person. I don't have a stereotypical personality.
Right, but it
look at me and go, "Oh, that's who you are." I don't have that.
But it goes back to but Jason, doesn't it go back to you have found a way for your own brand of acting so that you stand out in a crowd. That's the point I was trying to make, right?
No, I didn't do it that way. See, I never found a way to stand out. That wasn't my
But
reason.
it just happened.
No, because I was doing my work. So my job is to figure out how to be of service to the piece. So if the whole thing is, doctor, here's my chart, and they want me to sort of disappear, but I would have a reason, you're giving them the chart and the guy's dying and they're running in there going, doctor, here's your chart. That's the way I would do it. But I would have a previous circumstance and where I'm going and what's going on, where other people, doctor, here's your chart. I wouldn't do that. It wouldn't even occur to me to do it that way. And people wouldn't cast me that way for that.
But going back to what happened at Atlanta, you popped. You found a way to be noticed, and I think that's,
again, I never tried to be noticed.
It's not about intention.
Yeah,
it's not intention though.
As a kid, to be a star in my mind, so I have to do the opposite. I have to go into a room and I have to turn my lantern down. I have to keep myself quiet because people look at me when I walk into a room. There's something about me. It's happened my whole life, and I think it's just something I created when I was a kid to survive. To be funny and to because being a gay kid, people would want to beat you up and call you names and push you into the lockers and all these things. So I have found a way to survive in my own family and make fun of things and laugh. And I think, so it's the opposite of the way you're saying it. It didn't happen with intention. It happened for survival. And then now I have to work the other way to not do that.
Well, that's an interesting take. I mean, I see that whenever I've seen you on screen, you find a way to, and whether it's intentional or not, you own the role, and you do an excellent job. Those are things that I think that you have to have some intention to do in order to be successful. And you've been.
I don't know. I don't know if you're right. I don't know if you're right, because I think maybe I would have worked more if I would have let other people be the star or and I think part of me should have just shut up, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I mean, look, first of all, you're only 28, so you got a long way to go in this business.
Oh no, it's almost over, honey.
No, well, it's not going to be over.
At the end of my career, I'm in my third act as Jane Fonda.
I see, and I've always seen you as you're still reaching to go, and I
still have a love and a passion for the work,
and your drive to help others, and the mentorship that you've done, and all those programs, and the way that you give back, that is in itself a piece of your career, and I don't think you can take that out of yourself.
Well, it's part of my program in life. It's part of the. I've been in the 12-step program for 34 years in Al-Anon, and the last two steps are to give back. So I believe really strongly in that. And also, as you get older, you want to share the information and what you've learned and your experience, strength, and hope with other people. And I've taught a bit.
Well, I think some are that way. I mean, I think in life sometimes the longer we go on, the more we learn about being a little more selfless and to give. Right? You've got to be selfless to give, to want to give to others. And you've always been very generous. You've always been very generous.
I think I get a lot out of it too.
That's a good thing, right? I mean, because it's not.
I think it's important to, it's like there's a comedian, Robin Tyler, who was the first openly gay person on television, and I mention her name all the time. Her and Bruce Valanche, some of them, Kate Clinton, they were the beginning people who broke the ground so I could walk on it. So I think it's not just new people, but people that have been around. There weren't a lot of openly gay actors. There were more openly gay singers and comedians before there were actors, and it's not been an easy road. Would I have done it again? in the same way. I don't know how, if I would have the choice, if I would have watched a movie of my life, I would have been too scared. I would have just probably been frightened because some of it's been so hard. I don't know whether I would have done it the same way. Do I love the work? Yes. Do I love what I've accomplished? Yes. Would I have been able to do it if I knew more how this is going to be? I don't know. I don't know. I think I would have learned to do more things. But in my day, you didn't. When I became a comedian after being an actor since I was a kid in my early 20s, it was considered sort of gauche to do that. Oh, you can't work as an actor. You're going to do stand-up. And it wasn't something that was, now everybody's doing it. All the two is, the good-looking, now they're gorgeous. People look like me. They were just average Joes or dorky looking or, too tall, too fat, too something. You had to have a reason for being on stage. Now they'll let everybody. Those used to be what we called soap opera actors because they were, hair and makeup people.
What do you? That's an interesting way to segue to something. It almost seems as though, because you put in you've been thousands of hours, you've done all the work, you really, put in the effort. But now, thanks to just even the technology we're using and all the social media, it seems that all the world's a stage, right? How have you?
Unfortunately,
right. So
it's like anybody who thinks they can do anything. So there is no. It would be like everybody. Let's say everybody could fix toilets. Well, they can't, and you're going to get a lot of stuffed up toilets. So we have a lot of toilets stuck with a lot of crap. And it's like somebody saying, who do they want to hire? The person who, bends over and she's hot and got, big boobs and sexy, or some guy with a great ass and he's bending over and trying to fix the thing, or you want someone that can actually do the job. And that's the way. It doesn't matter now. It does not matter. There are so many these superhero movies have taken over. Hardly any movies are being made in the studio system. Now they're all independent films and independently financed. Some of my best films have been sold to studios were independently financed. And I even did that in Abducted, which was a Showtime original movie starring, who is this girl? I forgot her name. She does a lot of movies, Lifetime and all those kind of things. She starred in it. And then the guy from Borat was in it. He played the best friend. It was a lot of character actors and people you would know. And that was done independently and then sold to Showtime. A major, they even cut 20 minutes out of it. They cut a lot of the story out of it so it could be more action oriented, not, down to a tight 92 minutes or whatever, They don't want any story, and the director was certainly not happy, but he didn't have a choice. He wanted his movie sold. So, they're not making anything that isn't a superhero movie, it seems, unless it's a sequel, or rarely, does stuff get done.
It's definitely changed. I personally, I'm overwhelmed by the volume of content, and you're absolutely right. There's a lot of content, especially having gone to film school myself. I can't stomach it. There's just too much and not high enough quality. And it's too bad that we've gotten to a formulaic.
I like there's a lot of stuff, but I think hopefully the cream will go up, because I think, I've been lucky to work with Sean Baker and Nate Parker and some incredibly talented people. David E. Kelly, I got to work on his show. I got to work on James Duff's show, The Closer. I got to work on with some incredible people. I got to be in. Kira Sedgwick was incredible to work with. I worked on one of the earlier shows of It's Sunny in Philadelphia with those wonderful comedians. I got to work on My Wife and Kids with the brilliant Damon Wayans and Tisha Campbell. So funny. These are people who had hours of television, who I got to learn from. Norm Macdonald, who I thought was the worst in rehearsal I'd ever seen. And I thought, I don't know how he's going to do this show. And he was terrific. But the rehearsal, he could barely speak. And I thought, oh, he does this show like, hi, I'm Norm Macdonald, and I'm doing my line. And people fell in love with him, God bless him. I got to work on 2 episodes of Will and Grace with this incredible ensemble of people. I got to work, with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carol Baker on Kindergarten Cop. I got to work with Martin Short and, so many. George Clooney. I had a recurring role on a show called Sunset Beat that was done by Patrick Hasberg, who did 21 Jump Street. And I got to play Marty the nightclub owner. That was the beginning of my, annoying Jewish characters. And I got to work with George before he was really famous. And he was just incredible. I mean, the amount of, when I think about, from Bruce Dern and J.K. Simmons recently on Goliath to, I got to work in Mekhi Phifer's directorial debut called Puff Up Pass. Every single comedian from Saturday Night Live, SCTV, Mad TV were in this movie. Mo Collins and Phil Hartman, God bless him, and everybody from sitcoms, Constance Marie from I worked with George Lopez on his show. He was just great to me. And he hits me up all the time on Facebook, instant message telling me he wants to use me again. And this was 20 years ago I was on his show. No, 18 years ago. It was on his first show. Because his show is quite popular right now. And
well, I mean, maybe he'll have you on. Maybe you'll get that chance again. I mean, you've always been, of anyone I've known, very consistent because you're driven.
It's not driven. It's not. It doesn't. Those words feel wrong. I'm not a hustler. I don't feel like I'm driven. I feel like I have a passion for doing that work, and I think it's important the words that you use in life, because I don't feel like I'm hustling someone. I don't feel like I'm driven, like I'm crazy. Those words have other things to it. I think that I love the passion of the work. I love the idea that when I went in to see, Field of Dreams, and I understood my relationship with my father, when I saw Barbara Streisand in Funny Girl, I thought, oh my God, she's funny on the outside and sad on the inside, just like me. She looks like someone from my neighborhood. When I saw Mary Tyler Moore in Ordinary People, I was like blown away that someone who was, the girl next door could play this awful mom, to Dustin Hoffman, when I saw From the Graduate to Midnight Cowboy to Lenny to Kramer versus Kramer to Tootsie to Rain Man to, I thought this is extraordinary that this guy can do this and take me on this ride. So I feel like an artist. I don't feel like a hustler or and as I get older, I don't want to do anything that I don't want to do. Once you eat chocolate cake, you don't want that little Debbie's piece of crap. If you
no, and don't take it wrong. I mean, I admire the fact that
I don't take it as an insult at all. I just like to be clear and let people know how I feel, because if you're interviewing me, I want what I say and what to be the words that I would use, and I'm trying to change the words in my life. No,
that's very valid. But I mean, you absolutely have put in the time and the effort to get where you wanted to go and enjoy what you wanted to do. And there are a lot of people who don't get to do that.
That's not true. A lot of people don't want to do it. And a lot of people don't understand the amount of work it takes and focus and showing up.
Well, and then that's what you've done consistently. Right. I think that it definitely speaks for you that you've consistently brought what you have, your talent, your vision, your, and your professionality that's helped, sustain your career. And I have a lot of admiration for that. I want to hit on a couple things, because I think it's important that people get an opportunity to get to know you. You wrote a book about your life.
Yes, I did.
And I don't know. What brought that
Oh,
on?
shut up! I'm talking. I think because when you get to be a certain age, you want to get the story straight, and that's important to me. And also, you need things to sell after your show.
Well, then we definitely have to put the link for the Amazon
Go to
in.
jasonstewart.com and you can buy this on Amazon or you can buy it anywhere. It looks just like me, doesn't it?
No, actually, you look a little more svelte. You look like you've lost some weight recently.
No, this is. I think I'm the same weight I was in this.
Could be the angle.
I'm also a spokesperson for the mindfulwellness.com. And where they're doing the shops these days to help people lose. I've had a weight problem my whole life, and not a big weight problem. We're talking about 10, 20, 25 pounds, and in the last 5 years, COVID and everything, I gained 25 pounds, and then I lost 10, and then I gained 6, and then I lost 9, and then I gained 12, and then I gained 2, and now I have 7 more pounds to lose. And so
that's new math to me.
About that, hit me up on social media and I will tell you all about it.
And on your social media, I think one of the things that one of the unique things is Jason kind of puts it out there. Your mom does your social media with you a lot, doesn't she?
Sometimes, not a lot, and she doesn't like to do it. Because she doesn't like. She's very vain, and she wants to have pictures. She looks like she's in her 40s. And my friend Steve, he knows how to do that. So if you go to her Facebook page, you'll see that she doesn't look at all like he's made her look like she's 46 or something. It's ridiculous. She looks crazy. She's younger than me, and she's 87.
The beauties of technology.
JasonStuart.com is everything. You can watch my series Smothered by going there. You can see the films that I'm in. You can see my resume and clips and articles, and you'll know where I'm playing and everything.
Is there an artist that you always wanted to have an opportunity to work with but haven't had the chance? Like, was there that one bucket list artist that if you could get a chance to be creative with them in a scene?
I would say Meryl Streep. I would say Denzel Washington. They'd scare the shit out of me because they're so good. And I worked with J.K. Simmons and Bruce Dern in the same scene. I was a nervous wreck. It was right at the end of, not the end, the middle of COVID when people were starting to figure out how to work and do it and wear masks. And, it was scary. Certainly De Niro. Whoopi Goldberg. I know that probably sounds weird, but I think she's brilliant. Paul Giamatti. Who else? Jessica Lange. You notice they're all older people. Morgan Freeman. The younger people don't interest me as much because they haven't got the hours. And these people are so good. I did a film with Wilford Brimley called Eternity. I think I had 1 or 2 lines and I was in it for like 2 weeks because I played the cameraman on this show. And then so I basically had a lot of time where I didn't say anything. I just would walk around, and John Voight was the star of it. And I saw Wilford Brimley and I remember he was this great character actor, but he was very crabby. And I thought, what is he being crabby about? He's got this great job. And I thought, oh, I get it. Now as I'm getting older, I get it. You want the material to be good. You want everything to be, you want to keep going to a higher place. It's like after working on Birth of a Nation, I was invited to sit at the really big table for 2 or 3 weeks shooting a movie. To go to anything else felt like a letdown of sorts. So I finally understood that, but certainly appreciate whatever job I get these days.
For anyone watching who's younger and looking to be that creative, whether it be acting or comedy or whatever, and from what you see out there these days, right? And that comment that you just made about younger talent, what's some advice that you would give them that could help really kind of sink in, that they could use to help evaluate how to get to where they want to go in their career?
Well, learn your craft. Find another job that you can do that makes you money within the industry, so you learn to do more than one thing, because now you have to learn to be an editor, learn to be a writer, learn to be a publicist. Basically, you have to be your own publicist. You know, you learn to do social media really well. All this stuff is a part of your job. You can also make money at it. Like, I'm the spokesperson for something that I believe in, which is mindfulwellness.com. I believe in this company and I believe in these people, and I do these videos for them. You know, you create this book, and I wrote it with my pal Dan Duffy, and he helped me. I produced my own shorts. I produced a feature film called 10 Attitudes 20 years ago. I produced my own stand-up special, my own comedy album. So I know how to produce things. I'm trying to produce another short now that I want to do, direct in and act in, about generational wealth called Redlining, that I wrote. It's the first time I ever wrote something by myself. Every time I've written things with other people. Learn to do other things in the industry that you can make money at. It's because right now we don't know where the money is going to come from. I was lucky, you know, I saved my money and I lived an artist's life. I didn't, you know, I don't have $10,000 suits or, you know, $100,000 car. I didn't do all that. I saved everything so I could do that.
No, that's some great advice.
And try to have fun.
I think that's the most important thing. What right now you've been doing a lot of stand-up shows. What in the LA area, right?
Stand-up shows coming up. It's all on my website, jasonstuart.com, Stuart. I have a movie coming out where I have with Paul Rodriguez, wonderful comedian, icon, and Eric Roberts, Oscar nominee, called Garlic Parmesan. And I have a couple scenes, and I play this funny guy dad that owns this really bad improv company. And what else am I? Oh, I'm in this stand-up special called Laugh Proud, which is going to come out on Tubi and Amazon, and with a lot of other LGBTQ comedians. That's coming out in, I believe, the fall. And then I have my series Smothered, which is also going to come out on Tubi soon. We're in the process of doing that. And what else? I think that's it.
Well, it sounds like you're still pretty busy.
Yeah, I'm working.
Yeah, I'm proud of it.
A big show that I auditioned for, I got called back on. I'm not going to say the name of it, Stranger Things. And
I always thought if you could get a role as the Jewish superhero in Marvel or the Jewish alien from out of space in Star Wars or Star Trek, you'd be on the convention circuit.
I think I'd rather be the villain.
Do you enjoy those roles more? I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I saw Birth of a Nation, and I waited, and I went, "Where's Jason? Where's Jason?" And then I was blown away because it's not the Jason I ever knew from all the comedy you did. Right?
There's a lot of other parts like that I did that nobody saw the movie.
See, I just wasn't prepared for it. But I mean, do you gravitate more to that even kind of later part of your career?
Whatever people let me do, it's not like I'm being, offered. But I have to say, when I say that, I probably a third of my film and TV jobs have been offered to me. So, but you get what you get. You go after things. I was very in the mix to get the movie Maestro to play his manager, and that part got really cut down, and a big theater director got the part. And so, things happen, it's luck of the draw, who you know and who likes you.
That's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, my friend, it's been great to just see you because you look fantastic. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Get rid of that other 7. You lost me in the count. It was that new math thing that you did with all those numbers. It was crazy. Up, you're down, you're up, you're down, you're a roller coaster. But everybody, this has been truly enjoyable. I always learn things about Jason. I always learn from Jason. Get his book. Great story. Great story for you.
It's funny and it's touching. You'll laugh, you'll cry. It's better than Cats.
There you go. And it doesn't involve any cats. So I'll put all the links below. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and then the book. I guess you could put a direct link. It's easy.
Absolutely. Whatever can help. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Come back for more of these hangs on Almost Famous Magazine. And we look forward to having more comedians, more actors, more actresses, and people that really spend their time doing creative things, because that's what it's really about for us. So, Jason, thank you so much for joining us. And we're looking forward to seeing you on a very big screen soon.
I'd be willing to be on a small one.
Bye for now.